Good morning and welcome. We're going to give it just a minute more and then we'll get started. Thank you for answering the polls that we're waiting for you. Just helps Lynn and I kind of tweak our conversations when we know who's in the room. Oh, we have a lot of new people. That's great. And for those of you that are new, we will touch on the principles, but we won't go as deep. So we encourage you, if you hear something today that resonates and that you want to learn more, please go back and we'll tell you how to find additional training or opportunities. Welcome, SSAs and lots of other professionals. If you want to throw into the chat what your profession is, other than if you're a teacher, if you're a EI transition specialist, whatever it is, throw that into the chat for us. That'll be helpful too, if you're willing. Thank you. All right, Lynn, we can go ahead and get started. People will keep joining.
All right. I will confess I'm not seeing the poll results if you're seeing those. So what do who do we have in the room?
So, okay, sorry, Lynn. We are at 42% have not heard of charting or have heard of it, but haven't used any of the tools. We're at 33 of having used at least one tool. And then folks who have used two or more are in that probably 20% or a little bit, 25%. We are also primarily, we're 75% other professionals and providers, and then we are 25% SSAs.
Okay, welcome everyone to the early childhood space of Charting the Life course. I've enjoyed working with Celia on putting this presentation together, and working on Charting the Life course and getting it into the hands of early childhood families and family support professionals is something that's been high on my list. So I'm really happy that you're all here today. So my name is Lynn Fogel. I work for Ohio Family to Family Health Information Center. I'm the Central Ohio Family Support Specialist for Ohio F2F and one of 3 family support specialists that work across the state. We provide free one-on-one support to families of children with special health care needs all across the state. I'm also a Charting the Life course ambassador and a Good Life group facilitator through the Charting the Life course Nexus.
And I am Celia Schlomer. I am a family support specialist and a community engagement coordinator through the University of Cincinnati, UCED down in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I support families from birth into aging. I, like Lynn, have had a passion for this in the EI community, in the early childhood community for a while, because as a Charting Life course ambassador, when we're out sharing this, people make the connection in adult transition of why this can be so powerful. People do it, you know, at even at 14 in that age group where we're talking about beginning that transition process. But often those younger families, we haven't had as much movement there. And I think the layout, the foundation of this way of thinking is so key to changing things. And in my own family, I share with you, I'm a family member. So I am a parent, but I'm also an aunt and a sister-in-law and a sibling to individuals with developmental disabilities. And I think of this space and what a gift it would have been to our family at different stages for each one of those individuals. So I've become very passionate about sharing it with those that work with and those families who are who have children who are younger, because it really can, I always say it can give you the dream back. And so we'll talk about that more when we get started.
Yeah, and I will say just in one more second before we move on that I have a daughter with special needs, and she is now transitioning from school to adulthood. But the most stressful time in my life as a special needs parent was the time when she was transitioning from early childhood into school. And we managed, but it would have been really nice to have the life course framework to utilize to build my own vision and make it easier for me to share that with the folks in the school setting. And just another reason. So when I refer to my daughter's preschool journey, you'll know where that's coming from as we move through.
All right.
Okay, just need to mention that Charting the Life course is developed by the Life Course Nexus, University of Missouri, Kansas City. This is something that's very evidence-based, and it's been developed to serve families of children with special needs, but it has grown and it can literally be used by anyone, anywhere for future planning and developing a vision of what you want your good life to be. The Charting the Life course framework was developed by and for people with disabilities and families. The National Community of Practice is hosted by the National Association of State Directors of Developmental Disability Services. That's that NASDDS there at the bottom. This is a community practice across the country where different states have committed to being members and to learning more about Charting the Life course and using the principles and sharing what they've learned with families all across their state. And Ohio has been a part of this community of practice for a number of years, I'm proud to say. The Charting the Life course trainings are provided by the Family Resource Network of Ohio with funding from the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities, and we are grateful for their support.
And I just realized that I'm going to get prepared to do a video, and I realized when I shared, I didn't check that magical box. So y'all
so that everyone can hear it.
So I apologize for that. I'm going to re-share my screen here in just a sec.
So yes, the video that Celia is about to share, we are here today to do a deep dive into using Charting the Life course with early childhood families, but we're going to start with this short video clip that is from the Life Course Nexus about how fostering hope and expectations and dreams is important at every age and every stage across the lifespan.
So, oops, hold on one second, ladies and gentlemen. Oops. Perfect. There we go. All right. This will be a little different set. I almost just did it again. There we go. All right.
Life Course really came to fruition when I was working on my dissertation, and I interviewed parents in the Partners in Policymaking program. And it's an incredible national, international program. And I did it from a qualitative perspective and really wanted to understand what was happening for people, families in particular, that went through that program. And what I saw there was that our field has a lot of services, a lot of supports, a lot of innovation, and a lot of programs. But we weren't intentional about helping people have hope and really expectations and be able to dream. And it was when families saw self-advocates and other people with disabilities that they could actually start having hope and a dream again. So running a training center here at the university, I really wanted to capture and understand, we can put all this training together in the world and all these resources and all these directories. None of it matters if you don't have hope and you don't have somebody helping you create a vision, because the information you provide doesn't matter if it's not linked to a vision.
Okay, and so, one of the big questions is, why now? Why is it important to be working on this in early childhood? When you're introducing Charting the Life course to early childhood families, they might want to know, why are you asking me to think about my child's adult life or their future now? I have too much to think about, too much to get through each and every day. Or maybe they feel like they don't have the time or the energy or the emotional bandwidth to think about the future. But before you know it, the toddlers will be in school, and professionals and families who support these very young children know that it's important to give each child the best possible start, to prepare them for the next stages of life, and help them reach their vision for a productive and full good life in the future. So some reasons why families of very young children should be learning the skills of creating a vision for their child's future are, it's never too early to start. Okay. The future can be next month or next year, or when they start kindergarten, or when they're an adult. Whatever the family is able to focus on beyond the here and now, to start thinking about what that vision is for their child in that future space. And the sooner you're able to build your knowledge and develop language around who your child is, what their strengths are, what their needs are, their support needs are, that's building your vision as a family, and the stronger and more empowered you are going to be to share that vision with anyone who supports your child and who supports you. Okay, it's about family support too. So at every age of life, we need to look at the person first, to have a person-centered vision, because your child, it does not equal their disability. They are not what they cannot do. And you have hopes and dreams for a life that you imagine for them. So you're going to build that vision on seeing possibility and not disability. So what we're going to do today, what we're going to touch upon in this presentation, hopefully you know a little bit about life course principles already. We will recap them briefly here next. But we're going to talk about applying those principles to supporting families in the early childhood space. And we're going to sort of skim through the Charting the Life course domains as they are outlined in the early childhood quick guide, because they frame it from a early childhood lens, and they ask you some really good questions to consider when you're building your vision for your child in the early childhood stage of life. And then we have some examples of tools that have been created and used by families in early childhood, and stories of how those tools impacted the journey.
All right, I am going to adjust one more time so I can see all the screens that I need to be able to see real quick, so that I have that. All right. Didn't expect that video to be as problematic as it was. Try this one more time. Here we go. All right, we're back. So just for those of you, because I did notice that the poll changed a little bit towards the end, and we have a few more folks that are more familiar But for those of you who are only kind of seen it a couple of times, we try at the beginning to always make sure that we're touching on the 8 basic principles of charting a life course. And I'm hoping to give you just a brief lens of how they really make sense in this early childhood space, because sometimes, often, we hear that they don't quite make that connection yet of why that makes so much sense. But the first principle is the principle of all people. And this is all people with disability. A lot of times what we talk about here is the fact that only 25% of the 75% of people nationally that have disability or identified as a child or an adult with disability receive direct services. So knowing that that 75% is out there kind of trying to figure it out because they're not quite eligible yet, or they're not receiving direct services, or they don't even know what they don't know yet, right? And so in this space, that learning takes place. I mean, I would imagine that fluctuates, that 75%, because we're noticing they're not making milestones, or maybe we just got a diagnosis or things like that. So that all people have, the right to live, love, work, play. That's the core belief of charting a life course. But when we talk about it in these principles, we're just remembering that we're looking at everyone, not just those that we provide service dollars for, but those that we support in general as a family is on this journey and learning, especially in that early childhood phase. The next thing is that family systems and cycles. And this is really the person at the center of their family. We know, especially in early childhood, that children are dependent on their families. The work that professionals do in early childhood is with those families, with the child at the center, and kind of holding those families up. And with families comes lots of different dynamics, cultures, considerations that folks that are professionals in that space really need to consider and think about. But also we as families know that we need to build this foundation as new parents, as young families, where we're kind of connecting and creating that broader definition of family and connection, and folks that support us. Life stages and trajectory. We always want folks to have a future lens in looking at this life that they get to build with their child. And those things get a little tousled there in early childhood when we get a new diagnosis, or we're noticing the milestones not quite being where we need them to, or we don't know what we're noticing, but we're noticing something, which was my story. But we always want to have families have the ability to have a future vision. So knowing about and understanding this framework at this stage is key in my work. So, and then what we know is those experiences that we're creating for our family and for the people in our family are going to lead to life outcomes. So we want to influence and support families in having those experiences, whether they're typical experiences of first steps, or if they're broader, more specific to the disability type experiences of being in a new parent group or something around our child's differences or their disability. So that life outcomes piece, that's really ultimately what we're talking about, is making sure that we're having what we refer to in Charting Life Course is that good life, and making sure that we are providing families the opportunity to still have a vision for that good life with this new information that we have. Life domains. Where does life happen? We have a lot of different places and spaces. We have work, we have school, we have our own health. We have the idea of understanding how to stay safe. There are all these different aspects of life, and those are our life domains, and we'll go into those in a little bit more detail. Charting Life Course refers to the 3 buckets of support. And in this life stage of early childhood, we are kind of using those buckets in lots of different ways, but we're going to go into those more deeply. But I want you to imagine families that you support, or the child that you support, kind of going through life with these 3 buckets. One is goods and services, the things we need to have in our life to live, right? And the next one is discovery and navigation. What do we need to know? And that's so broad and big with young parents anyway. And then there's that peer-to-peer support and that connection with others who are along the journey with us. And that's why in typical communities everywhere, there's moms groups, and there's prayer groups, and there's different communal groups that are supporting those young families for good reason. And we'll talk about that more. Integrated supports. This concept is something that I would love to get in our early intervention families, that we aren't necessarily simply focusing on the good or the service, but we want to integrate all those things that are available to us. So we'll share that tool and how it applies to early intervention. And then policy and systems. And this concept is one that I always want to make sure is here, because ultimately for the professionals in the room, especially those who know early childhood, we're going to influence how we do things because of what we learn about families, what they need, what's important to them, the visions that they have for their children, regardless of their child's disability. So really, how do we influence the way we operate as systems, whether that's the civic system or whether that's the medical system or whether that's the developmental disability system, in order to be more responsive to families and support them in a way that this journey is the beautiful thing that it can be. But ultimately, this concept is one that I think is near and dear in this space for me, is because that all people exist within this context of family, and we are reliant as systems, those who say we want to support and we want to help and we want to build things and opportunities and goods and services for you, so your life is that good life that we talk about. But we know that we are reliant on families to do this work. We know in early intervention, families may not have even discovered whatever systems support them in the community and in the disability world. And so they're doing this on their own, and they're holding the torch, walking their child through these early stages of their life. And we are dependent on them to be able to share with us and bring to the table what they know of this child and within the context of their own family. And then as we go into adulthood, we again are reliant. We know that families, if those of us in the disability community who support families were totally responsible for all that work, the system would stop. We need families' vision. We need family support. We need to walk alongside families to make this work. So those buckets of support I talked about, as you can see here, goods and services, discovery and navigation, connecting and networking, right? And we, at those early stages when families are just getting a diagnosis or just learning new things about their child's development, we immediately begin to want to connect them to those things they might be eligible for. But we have two other buckets. And as I said, if you have the visual of you as a professional carrying those buckets, if you have a visual of families carrying those buckets, at any one time, one bucket might be empty that could have crucial support that will make this journey beautiful and easier and help us not feel so overwhelmed. So there's the discovery and navigation bucket. And in these earlier stages, pretty full in most cases. Once we know there's something different, our pediatrician's going to give us information. Our community supports are going to give us information. There's going to be grassroots family organizations if your child has Down syndrome or if your child has autism, and you're going to start filling that bucket with all the things that folks are telling you. School, that early school age, your county board, they're going to be filling that bucket with tons of information. In addition to that, they might start talking to you about eligibility and qualifying, that goods and services bucket. I want to put that aside for a second. I want to jump over to that peer-to-peer support bucket. That idea that I want to know other families that are walking this journey. I always said I want one that's 2 to 3, maybe even 5 years ahead of me, so I can learn and watch and say, what did you do at this stage? And be able to listen to them reflect back on where they were able to feel supported and have that information. So that connecting and networking, and we are really good at doing that as soon as we are able to connect to those families, but those family support groups. And for me, we created our own, those just natural, my friends from college, we were all having our babies at the same time and connecting with them. Those were the first times that I saw differences in my daughter compared to other people's kids. And so those opportunities are crucial in us learning about our children and what we might need. And then lastly, that goods and services bucket. But if we have a full discovery and navigation bucket and a full connecting and network bucket, and you as professionals are part of that connection and network, that goods and services bucket is imperative and important and necessary, but it may not feel as daunting to not have it if we don't have it yet. So those professionals in the room, I want you to think about that in terms of when families don't qualify or when families are waiting to hear or wondering if they're eligible. You have 2 other buckets you can be filling in the meantime. And I didn't adjust this side, so I'm just going to do this. Sorry. So in this, I just very briefly went and put down what I know in these 3 different buckets about early childhood. And those of you that are professionals that are in early childhood may know tons more. And it may depend on your region. Some of these are statewide. Some of them they're just regionally. but just to know and think about the things that you tend to share with families and put them all in one place, or maybe you as a county board or as an organization might have a lot of things. And you might, if you put them and map them out, you might go, wow, our connecting and networking bucket is emptier than the rest. I wonder what we could do about that. Again, that's the changing the policies and procedures that I talked about on those previous slides, and really just looking at how to access that stage, right? But let's step a little bit into out of the buckets and into the Charting a Life Course domains. So those domains are those aspects of life I talked about earlier. And the first domain is daily life and employment, which I really kind of, the first time I was exposed to Charting a Life Course, I kind of giggled. I'm like, seriously, we're going to talk about employment when the child's a toddler? How do we even think about that? But first of all, I go back to when moms are pregnant and you're imagining what life's going to look like. You go there, you imagine, where are they going to live? Who are they going to marry? I mean, your head just goes, it's natural. So knowing that piece, in addition to that, we start very young, looking at a toddler or a young school age child and saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there's a little tinge in your heart as a mom of a child with a disability, sometimes going, I don't even know what's possible to even think about. And so hearing and asking that question in this age, when we already know that there's a difference from their typical peers, can be a little daunting and a little uncomfortable. And what I love about Charting a Life Course is it doesn't shy away from those conversations. It gives us a vision, because with a vision, we can make things happen. So daily life and employment might be, are you giving that particular child in your family the same chores you would have, or the same chores as their peers? Are you having the same expectations of them? Are you connecting and with other families to notice and see where you might need help? Things like that. So it comes with a list of questions to ask yourself as a young family of what you're thinking about in each one of these domains. The next domain is community living. And yes, we want to imagine being part of this community. But I know as a young mom, when there were differences in my oldest daughter, going out in the community became less fun. You know, not so much at these younger ages for me, but for a lot of families, it becomes uncomfortable because people notice differences and explaining it or talking about it. And the younger families now are stronger in that because we've done a better job. But I want to continue that conversation. And then what do we need at home that might need to be different? Maybe our child's going to be a wheelchair user. Maybe our child is going to possibly use a walker. How do we have to change things at home within our house to accommodate that? And it asks questions and gets families started on those conversations. The social and spirituality space. And this at early childhood is those moms groups that we go to, that we're going as a mom, as much as we're taking it to have our child have an opportunity to play. I belong to one that was in my church, but some of them are put on by different organizations, community centers where you're gathering, and sometimes they're by age. You know, there's a birth to 18-month moms group that meets, or something like that. So we're beginning to connect and know other people in our area who have kids our age. Eventually, these will be the same kids our kids are in school with. We meet people in our neighborhood. We begin to build those circles. So really important. And in this quick guide that goes through these domains for you, it'll say, are you making sure your child's included with typical peers in places that they go? Are you having individuals come to your home? Are you inviting people in for play dates? And we did a support and a training with Sycamore Schools, and there was a young early childhood family there. And that was news, to plan the play date, to not wait for the invitation. And she became brave and she began to have people in her house. That was her big takeaway. And it changed things for them dramatically because her heart was breaking, waiting for those invitations for her daughter. But when she became the person that was inviting, people came. And so just kind of setting that mindset, setting that way of thinking is really important. Go ahead, Lynn. Oh, you're muted, hon.
Sorry. So continuing through these life domains, healthy living, for a lot of families, in the early intervention space, health and medical things might be too much of a focus, right? Like for those of us whose child had a number of different medical diagnoses, which was their, you know, entree into early intervention and special needs preschool and all of those kinds of services. It may feel like this life domain sort of takes over your life, but it can also be important within charting the life course, because that thing is going to impact every aspect of your life. And so a parent may actually need a little bit of help figuring out how to include these priorities in their vision, how to share what their child needs in the way of health related supports, for example, in an educational space. They're going to a special needs preschool, and how to make it really clear and help those intervention specialists, for example, to support their child in the best way possible. But then within this domain, the sort of questions that the quick guide asks, the family can consider how to use charting the life course principles within those healthcare spaces as well. So how can the parent help the pediatrician understand and meet the needs of the child? Sometimes the parent ends up being a sort of coordinator between specialists that their child is working with because of their diagnosis, and the pediatrician as the primary care physician. And life course tools can be helpful in that kind of role. And then, you know, what to do if you are not in agreement with what the medical professionals are saying. As the parent, you're the person who knows your child best. But how do you figure out how to share with them what you know to be true about your child? And then there's things like considering what sort of therapies or activities your child needs and advocating for those to be put into place. Nutrition, you know, that it's a lot of times nutrition is a big hurdle. For my daughter, who was at risk for failure to thrive, it was a big focus. For families whose children have a hard time with different food textures or with different foods, period, and who only want to eat 2 things ever, it becomes, a lot of times their life seems to revolve around these kinds of things. So this is all something to keep in mind, and healthy living affects every aspect of our lives. Okay, so safety and security, definitely, safety is at the forefront when it comes to young children. Parents are oftentimes constantly in the mode of feeling like they need to protect their child. And especially when children are not hitting the milestones and feel like you need to be even more on top of things, right? But you need to get beyond like the basic mom fear, the parent fear, and help them learning independence at the level that they're able to achieve is building their own sense of security, and in turn it's building their own safety. There you go. So the next domain is advocacy and engagement. This is a big one. It's not so again, this may be one where in the early childhood space, you think they need me to advocate for them. They're not even able to talk yet. So I have to be their voice and I have to be their advocate. And that is absolutely true. But it's never too early to start giving your child opportunities to make choices. Okay. And that's the first step towards self-advocacy, is being able to make choices, to know what they want and to communicate what they want to others. It's the first step towards self-advocacy. As a parent, you might be interested in learning about advocacy on a level beyond your family. You might want to learn how you can help other parents who are coming along behind you in that peer-to-peer role. You might want to learn how to be a strong voice for policy or systems change. And those are all things that there's training and opportunities available out there to parents. And so we want to put those opportunities in their hands so that they have those opportunities to become a stronger self-advocate and a stronger advocate for their child. Things like accepting your child for who they are and looking beyond their disability. There are parents who are hesitant to engage with their community because they're embarrassed by their child's disability, or they just don't know how to explain it to others. And so that type of self-advocacy for parents is important to build those self-advocacy muscles as well. As far as siblings and extended family members, learning how to involve them in the child's care, to educate them about who the child is and what they need. And then again, back to helping the child develop self-advocacy skills. Are you helping them learn how to follow rules at home and in other settings? Are you giving examples to them about volunteering and giving back to the community and teaching them how they can give back as well? Next slide. Oh, there we go. So all of this is included in the Focus on Early Childhood Quick Guide. So this is a picture of it. I believe that Tracy has sent this out as a couple of handouts that she sent out to everyone who was registered. All of these domains are located in this quick guide that we just have gone through. And that is where you'll find all those questions that families can ask when they're considering different aspects of life and building that vision.
Thanks, Lynn. And, I think it's important when you think about these domains, it's not so much that as professionals, you're going to go in and train families to know about all the domains. We do life in those spaces. I think what's going to happen is you can look at families that you support if you're a professional, or you can self-reflect as a family member to say, where is all my focus going? And do I need to kind of expand it to look at it? And so a lot of times, as Lynn said, safety and security and health become the primary focus. And then we forget that they're not connecting with other friends their age, or they're not sitting on a floor playing with blocks and those kinds of things. So it's this encouragement of that whole child that we see and hear about in school, and that we know helps a child's development. And so just kind of shaking it off, that say, yes, those things are really important and they will take up a lot of our times as young families, but at the same time that we can think about these other things and get excited and share our child's progress and see it in those spaces too. And in addition to that, you can utilize these resources. There's 2 of them there. Go look at them. Even if it's as simple as printing off the Focus on Early Childhood Quick Guide and giving it to the families that you support, or as a mom, carrying it with you to remind yourself of the things that you can think about, dream about, hope for. You may not be doing them yet. They may not be ready, but there will be a time when they are. And so looking at those possibilities and kind of understanding that each stage has its little points along the trajectory, and each one's a step closer to that bigger, broader vision. And with the bigger, broader vision comes the trajectory. So that was a great segue. So knowing we are looking at this thing in Charting the Life course as a good life. And when you are supporting a child or loving a child that's in these early stages, keep possibility at the front point. Lynn said that earlier, thinking about not just their disability, but really seeing possibility and just doing what if and keeping that at the forefront. Because when you have that vision, that trajectory creates that picture that we're moving upward and onward. And that trajectory does not have to be a trajectory of when they're 22. That trajectory could be a trajectory for next week or how I'm going to get through laundry. It really doesn't have to be that bigger picture, but it's a great tool to make sure that we're looking forward and that we're building something. And we know in Charting the Life course, when we've utilized the trajectory, that in these conversations in Ohio, we're going to hear the same things that people want and don't want. And they're driven somewhat by societal values. We want friends, we want family, we want leisure activities that we love. We don't want to be alone or isolated. And in this early intervention stage, when we're getting all this information about our child that didn't picture the vision that we were imagining in utero, maybe, that's a lot to take in. And we tend to isolate. You know, Lynn talked about the fact that we may not know how to talk about this with our friends. It's uncomfortable. And we may not want to expose ourselves as new families with everything else. I mean, even just things outside of disability, breastfeeding, you know, a crying baby, those things we feel judged and we feel looked at, and we want families to feel empowered to not isolate because of that. And so I think this is professionals and as families, when you're listening, this can help kind of pull you away from that and understand and look at this differently and have different uplifting and positive conversation. And whoops, wrong way. And when we have these conversations, when we talk about vision, I really want to, you know, encourage you to step away from that idea that a vision isn't built on what systems have. We don't wait for them to say, oh, you get to go do this thing or participate in this thing, and now that's my vision. No, visions come, like I talked about, when you're imagining what your child's going to do when they first, you know, you're first holding them for the first time. And so they're grown out of what people want. And this tool, this framework, these tools empower that family voice to come out. They allow a mom to say, this is what I imagine, and this is what we want, and this is who we are culturally, this is who we are to a core as a family. These are the people that are important to us that need to be in their life, and we need to build whatever we talk about, whatever you offer me, around that. And that's really what we're talking about. So this idea that Charting a Life course is not about, it's not a tool to be completed, okay? It really is not this thing to be done. It's not to be done to a family. This is a way of encouraging family to grow in their thinking. It's about empowering that family to know the power of their own vision. It's, you know, it's about supporting the family's vision one step at a time, right? It's about supporting the conversations that they can have and encouraging a family to use these tools to develop a dream and a hope again. So it really isn't about how it ties to our work as people that support families, but to give family that dream back, right? It really is best used when families are lost or overwhelmed, or maybe it's best used when they're excited and feeling strong. You know, Charting the Life course helps families organize. It helps them strategize and hope and dream. And that's really what we're talking about in these younger years, is giving that back to them. I may have stepped on one of your slides there. Oh no, that was me. Okay. And Lynn, I'm going to go ahead. Is this right? Yeah. So we're going to present some tools here, and I'm going to pass it off to Lynn. We're just going to go through 2 or 3 of the tools and what they can look like in early childhood. And I want to make sure that we're conscientious of time and get you out of here on time. So we're not going to go through the details of the tools themselves and read every line. We want you to know what the possibilities are, and each family takes it and runs with it themselves. And this is paperwork that belongs to families. This is not, you know, I don't encourage you to, as I said before, we don't do it to a family. We can do it with a family. We can reflect on what we hear from a family, but families, I encourage you, this is your strength, and you'll hear some of those stories. But go ahead, Lynn.
So the trajectory that Celia had mentioned and was talking about. It's one of the primary tools that we look at in charting the life course. And so within the early intervention space, as I said earlier, that future spot, it could be next month, it could be next year, it could be looking ahead toward kindergarten. But this is an example of a parent whose future was she needed to get beyond, you know, these behaviors that were wreaking havoc with her family. And so she did a trajectory and said, in the box at the bottom of what I don't want, described some things that were actually happening in the way she saw it going, right? Like if things go on the way they are going, this is what's going to be like, and this is what I don't want. And so she created this trajectory and as a way to develop a better morning routine so that their family was less thrown into chaos every morning trying to get out the door and get on with their day. So that's an example of a sort of, you know, micro situation that she planned using the trajectory. This is an example of one that I created reflecting back on my daughter's early childhood experience. And so there were two things that were really central in my daughter's life at that point in our family's life. And one was, as I mentioned earlier, nutritional considerations. She was at risk for failure to thrive. And so I, you know, put this in here because a lot of what we were focusing on in early childhood was focused on this. And the other thing was the fact that my daughter has cerebral palsy and is a wheelchair user. And at that time, we didn't know if she would or wouldn't be, but she definitely was missing all the milestones, right? She wasn't sitting up, she wasn't crawling, she wasn't pulling up to stand. And so I worried that everyone would be doing everything for her, and that learned helplessness that would develop because she wasn't doing anything for herself. And so those were the two things that I wanted to avoid. And I built this trajectory. It wasn't a trajectory. I mean, I didn't use the tool at the time because we didn't have Charting the Life course in our life at the time. But looking back on it, these were things I focused on at that time.
And that's what I love about these tools is they can be reflective and they can kind of recenter you in a lot of ways. So thanks for sharing that, Lynn. Go ahead. Sorry.
So then Celia has recently been working with a preschool mom who's just made the journey through early childhood. And after some training in Charting the Life course, this was what she did with the trajectory. She knew what she didn't want for her son, and she knew she had some goals that she really wanted to focus on. And she turned it into this list of goals to help the people who were working with her son know what was important to her, what was important for him as he's moving into this preschool space. And these were the goals that she set for him so that he'd be moving in the right direction.
And I think it's important to see that families will do with this what they want. It's not so much about the graphics here. It's the fact that she went, I get the trajectory. It's helped me think through it. This is what I want to share after I went through the trajectory myself. So it really is something that families can run with when they're given this support. And I say that support was only one set of training. So each family is different. And so that this particular one I wanted to share because we wanted to give, not everybody is going to develop something like that. Something as simple as this particular one-page person-centered description. So those of you who know Charting the Life course, the one-page person-centered description is basically 3 questions. What do people like and admire about me? What's important to me? And how can you best support me? And it's a great way to bring the child into a space. And we're going into a lot of new spaces, doctor's offices, play groups, church, daycare centers. You know, we're going into a lot of new places, and having a tool like this one is really powerful. And it didn't go into a great deal of detail. It was just simply that he responds, you know, what he responds to, what's important to them as a family. You know, who is it? My parents, my sister, any toy with wheels. If you're at a daycare center and we're playing and you need something to calm, holding a truck, or maybe there's a meltdown. And in that meltdown, we're not sure what's going, and then we realize another little boy took the truck. Oh, trucks are really important. So knowing those things can be really powerful. I love give me time to learn and explore. That piece just gives a mindset to a new take care provider of those first couple days, what they might look like, and giving room to step back and watch. So again, they can be very simple or more detailed. Again, that same mom took the idea of this one-page person-centered description and ran with it. Hers has a lot on it. We can do it simply for one setting, like in this one. And then it's very simple and basic. What she did was she wanted a document that she could take to medical appointments. You see important medical things, to daycares or to caregivers, few cool things about me, things to talk about with me, things to focus on, what helps me. So if I'm using soothing in daycare or in school, preschool, so things like that. She kind of put it all on one page, so it had a purpose for everything. But you can make it really simple and do one for each setting, and you can use the sheets that are provided through the Charting the Life course website, or you can create your own. Another tool that we use a lot is the Charting the Life course star. Because of time, I want to go through this quickly. Please know that there's videos about the star, there's videos about the trajectory, and learning sessions available on our website, Family Resource Network of Ohio, and those web pages will be available at the end, where you can go more deeply and understand it more deeply. But very quickly, there's 5 points to the star. The first one is personal strengths, and that's, what do I need to learn? What do I need to have to move our family towards? So the family vision towards what we could do to even have a vision. We give our visions back as young families. We stop dreaming. I can remember my brother when his daughter was born with Down syndrome, and he called and he said, "It's a girl. She has Down syndrome. I guess I'm not paying for the wedding." That's where families are at early childhood. They're figuring out what they have to give up, and just reminding them that those things and those conversations aren't necessary yet, and we can create a vision for those opportunities. Relationships. Am I connecting in the ways that I need to connect as a new mom, as a mom with a child with a disability, as just a mom, to be able to get through my day to day, right? And who are those people for me? Community based activities and opportunities and resources. What's available to everybody else in the community, those play groups, those church groups. I want to maintain those things that are important to our core as a family. How do I do this with our whole family, right? And then technology. How can we utilize technology? And we know in Ohio, technology is different now than it was even 2 years ago, and how we're utilizing this. How can we stay connected as new families? Where can we find information and opportunities for that? So without saying that these younger families are more technologically savvy than we were at that age, but knowing and utilizing and focusing that when we can't find it other ways. And then eligibility specific, and we do that last. Professionals in the room, I challenge you to listen to yourselves when you talk to families, and that goods and services bucket, that eligibility bucket, and immediately going there. I challenge you to stop for a second and breathe and go, is there a place that we can do that can partner with that? Right? To encourage that when I give them an eligibility specific opportunity or thing to look to see if we're eligible for, what's another thing that I can give you? It's from one of those other 4 points, the star, so that we're empowering you not to be dependent on that system or to believe that that's the golden ticket, because we do build that with families very young. And we as systems need to own that and think about how we can talk to them differently. So really quickly, again, the family that we shared with you, she went through and she created the star. Again, she did it differently. She must love Canva. Canva, is that what it's called? And she created this great document that she could share with others on what they needed support. Not so much about the beauty of the graphics or what she did. That worked for her. That made her feel fulfilled and gave her some place that she could control and share in a way that was important to her. But just a beautiful way for her to go through and find these different things. And you see in number 3, she was moving from that IFSP to the IEP, and she was very worried about information being lost. Right. And so that's why she jumped with these tools, because she was just in a place of fear of everything that she knows about her son and had spent 3 years with those early intervention folks learning and processing, and she wanted it not to get lost. And that's really what these tools became for her. And I want you to see that rather than the beautiful graphics, is how it empowered her to make sure that information wasn't lost. And that's where families are. They want you to know everything because they're just afraid you won't understand them unless you know all. And it's important to do that. Lynn, I want you to briefly share your start because we only have 5 minutes left and I want to get to Itara's video. So just if you can. Yep.
So reflectively, I looked back at my daughter's preschool experience and I created this star using the star tool that's, available on the Life Course Tools website. And I put in the center what her preschool supports were. So I treated this tool in this instance like a resource map, and was just listing all the different places where her supports were coming from at that age and at that stage. And so, relationships, technology, it doesn't have to be electronic technology like computers. I put things on there like her AFOs and her walker and her stander and her kid cart, which was her very first little wheelchair, and the bath seat we used, all of her adaptive equipment I put there in technology. And it was just a way to map everything out. And when I use this with families of children of any age, typically I'm writing down as they're telling me what they have access to and what they've utilized. And then I look for the space that's empty, right? And I try to fill in the blank for them and go looking for supports in the place where they're not already finding it. So
I love that, Lynn, looking for the spot that's empty, because sometimes that's where the key is looking for that. So thank you for that. We want to share with you really quick, because I think listening to us talk all day about how you might or think about using this as a family or as a professional isn't near the impact of listening to a family member talk about the difference it made. And so I want you to very briefly, I want you to listen to Itara in this 2-minute video and what it meant to her to learn these tools. So I think this should work. Oh. And make sure you tell me if you can hear it.
Hi, my name is Itara, and I'm
Yep,
a single
I can
mom
hear
of
it.
a newly 3-year-old boy on the autism spectrum. He is also impacted by a rare chromosome genetic disorder called duplication of 6p. Charting the life course came at a God-given time in my life. Our family was actually transitioning from early intervention services to an individualized education plan. And in the middle of that transition, I was still collecting resources, also establishing specialists for our medical care team, as well as preparing for my son's second corrective eyelid surgery. So as you can imagine, the atmosphere in my household was of high stress. So I was relieved when I discovered my first Try to Life course workshop in the context of an IEP. And after attending, I immediately left feeling inspired and that I this was something that I can do. And with that new can-do attitude and uplifted spirit, I made my first 1-page descriptor for my son. Now, the tools for charting the life course have been a great way for me to view my son as a whole person and not just in the context of a medical diagnosis. They've also allowed me to really dream and think about my son's future without fear and with hope again. And so now I proudly carry around his 1-page person descriptor wherever we go, along with our thick 3-inch medical binder. Because when you meet my son, I want you to see all of him. I want you to have an understanding of our journey. And I also want to be able to welcome you into our family. And these tools have allowed me to do just that. So I hope that you and your family will be empowered and impacted just as I am.
All right. So, and what I love about what she says is this idea that it empowered her. And I think at this stage with any journey, being empowered and feeling you get all the tools in your toolbox as you start can be really meaningful. Just really quick, I want to end with this quote and the second paragraph. We know that families with individuals with disabilities need to be intentional about planning for their child's future and including that dreaming broadly, and EI is the perfect space for that. I'm going to show you, because of time, I'm just going to go to the last slide and give you the evaluation. So we don't lose you. Please fill out your evaluation. If we can put that into the chat too, Tracy, if you're able to do that. I appreciate all your time. I'm so glad you guys stuck around till the end for us to learn most from the families. And I hope you come back to learn more in this space.